We're all stuck with the Cecil B. DeMille version of Rome, a city of hulking white marble on a gargantuan scale. But in 500 BC, Rome was made of wood and mud. Hicksville on the banks of the River Tiber. A Roman Empire? Dream on. The story of Carthage forces us to see another side of the Romans. Not the upright lawgivers, but the thuggish upstarts. Not the flag bearers of civilization, but the ruthless wannabes. By 300 BC, Rome was punching and kicking its way to becoming a militarized state. Like some monstrous embryo with a destiny to fulfill, straining to be born. Rome had been feeling the heat. The islands off its west coast were all Carthaginian, just that little bit too close for comfort. In Sardinia, Carthage had riches on tap, from its mines of silver, gold, copper, tin and zinc. The Carthaginians were greedy for land like this in southern Sardinia. The earth here is literally crammed full of precious minerals. And what's more, it's handily perched by the sea, ready to disgorge its metals onto the waiting Carthaginian ships. For over 300 years, the vast mineral wealth of Sardinia and Spain helped pay for the Carthaginian navy in its efforts to police the Mediterranean Sea and to keep it open for business. Control of the sea was what counted. As rivals developed naval fleets, the Carthaginians stayed way ahead of the game. Their ships could be assembled in the turn of a tide because they were made in kit form, with the instructions written directly onto the wood. It was an inspired, visionary design that would one day contribute to Carthage's downfall.
The point is that anybody, well, almost anybody, with any rudimentary carpentry experience could put this boat together. Once you had the prototype, you didn't need some fancy boat builder to put it together for you. So 2,000 years before IKEA, the Carthaginians had created a flat-pack navy.
And here it is, world-class hardware to put the frighteners on your foes. Carthage's fleet of giant battleships could outpace and overwhelm any other on the Mediterranean.
Halcyon days for Carthage, but they'd failed to hear the distant rumblings from Italy over the sea. Rome, that small, insignificant city-state, had, after a long series of bloody wars, subjugated the whole of central Italy. Rome was on the up, but still nothing more than a small regional power. Nothing for the Carthaginians to worry about, or so they thought.
But Rome had become a contender. Its legions were creeping southwards, devouring land in their path, city by city, state by state. While the Carthaginians revelled in their success, envious eyes were beginning to size up their good fortune. From its humble beginnings, Rome's rise had been relentless. By the 3rd century BC, it had bulldozed its way through Italy with determination, luck, and overwhelming force. It wasn't long before the snarling supremacists of the land cast around for a new challenge: the sea. Carthage's days of having the Mediterranean to itself were over.
By 275 BC, Rome had conquered virtually the whole of Italy, and now she started jealously eyeing up those lucrative southern trade routes which Carthage controlled. But before she could mount a serious challenge, she had to conquer the sea.
Carthage's juiciest peach was Sicily, almost halfway between Rome and North Africa. Prime position for a violent tug of love. A chilly standoff gave way to Cold War. Carthage promised to stay out of Italy if Rome kept out of Sicily. But I get the feeling the Carthaginians didn't have a clue who they were dealing with here. There was a new elite controlling Rome, a nouveau riche, gorged on money and short on scruples, that was hankering after Sicily's charms. You can see why at this superb archaeological site, a Carthaginian settlement on the small island of Motia, off the west coast of Sicily. The community here was running a lucrative staging post for Carthaginian ships circling the Mediterranean. There were good reasons why Rome wanted Sicily so badly. Rome was governed by fear. Sicily was only a short hop away from mainland Italy, and places like this dock at Motia, were fantastic for making sure that Carthaginian ships could be rearmed and restocked for a potential strike on the Italian mainland. Another reason for Rome's aggression was greed. The businessmen turned politicians who now controlled Rome had originally made their fortunes through trade in the southern Mediterranean, and one of their best customers had been Carthage. Now the thinking was that if they controlled places such as this, they'd be able to flood North Africa with their produce. And so fear and greed, Rome's belligerent twins, took their first swipe at Carthage's empire, 264 years before Christ. History calls it the First Punic War, but to me, it's more than just another ancient conflict. It was unparalleled in its savagery, and it lasted 25 years. But more than this, it marked Rome's blood-soaked birth as an empire. I'm now in the very waters where Roman and Carthaginian ships once fought, in a war that irreversibly changed the balance of power in the Mediterranean. The First Punic War was a real turning point for the Roman Empire. Rome, traditionally a land power, at last found her sea legs. But it was a close-run thing. Just listen to this for a scorecard. They lost 700 ships compared with the Carthaginians' 400. And they lurched from disaster to catastrophe. And one Roman admiral, frustrated because the sacred chickens that were meant to augur luck were off their feed, tossed them overboard, saying, well, if they're not hungry, perhaps they'd like a drink instead. He went on to preside over the biggest naval disaster that Rome ever suffered, losing the whole of his fleet. But in what must be one of the most bitter ironies in ancient history, it was the Carthaginians who inadvertently turned Rome into a major sea power. The course of the war was about to change. By incredible luck, a Carthaginian warship strayed into Roman waters. Capturing the ship, Rome now had an unbelievable opportunity to learn how to build the best battleship on the sea. Roman boatwrights immediately took it apart and discovered that every timber was marked with a letter.
With lightning speed, the Roman navy copied the ship, plank by plank, nail by nail, thanks to those instructions so helpfully left by the Carthaginians. And in no time at all, Rome had built an identikit navy.
A staggering 220 ships were built in 45 days. Rome could now take on Carthage on equal terms. If they could beat Carthage at sea, they'd remove the sole obstacle to exploiting the Mediterranean themselves. The balance of power swung violently between Carthage and Rome for another 20 years, until, in 241 BC, Carthage suffered a catastrophic defeat. It was forced to hand over all of its lands in Sicily. Rome could now control the gateway to the western Mediterranean. It could be policeman and tax collector, deciding who could come in and who could go out. Rome had inflicted a crushing defeat on Carthage in its own element, the sea.